There is a specific kind of exhaustion that comes with being a soldier in a war that doesn't feel like it belongs to you. In Ernest Hemingway's A Farewell to Arms, we meet Frederic Henry, an American serving as an ambulance driver for the Italian army during World War I. He isn't a hero in the traditional sense, he's a man performing a job in a landscape of mud, dust, and endless repetitive movement. At the start of the story, the war feels almost absurd to him. It's a series of disconnected events, moving through dusty roads, watching soldiers wait for orders, and witnessing the grim mechanical reality of the front lines. It's a world of logistics and waiting, where the grand ideas of patriotism or glory feel thin and hollow compared to the physical reality of the terrain. While navigating this chaos, Frederic meets Catherine Barkley, a British nurse. Their initial romance isn't a sweeping cinematic passion. Instead, it feels like a game. They use each other to pass the time and to distract themselves from the emptiness of military life. For Frederic, intimacy is a way to find a sense of normalcy in a world that has lost its logic. He's not looking for a soulmate, he's looking for a way to feel something other than the boredom and the quiet dread of the war. But as the war intensifies, that sense of playfulness begins to harden into something much more desperate and all-consuming. Everything changes during a sudden, violent bombardment. The intellectual debates about the futility of war and the strategic movements of armies are instantly replaced by the visceral, bloody reality of physical pain. Frederic is wounded, his legs and his head are hit by shrapnel, and suddenly he is no longer just a detached observer. He is a participant in the carnage. While he's recovering in a field hospital, we see the psychological toll the war takes on those around him. He spends time with Rinaldi, a charismatic surgeon and a friend of his. Rinaldi is a man who tries to find meaning through his work, through the precision of surgery and the passion of his personal life. But even Rinaldi is being eroded. The war is stripping away his spirit, leaving him increasingly nihilistic. Then there is the priest, a man who represents the struggle to find spiritual order in such a mess. The priest expresses a profound war disgust, a weariness that suggests the carnage isn't a grand sacrifice, but a senseless, repetitive cycle of death. Frederic is eventually transferred to a hospital in Milan, and it's here that he reunites with Catherine. Their relationship shifts. It's no longer a game to pass the time, it's become an intense, obsessive cocoon. They try to build a private world, a sanctuary where the war cannot reach them. They eat, they drink, they sleep, and they try to exist entirely within the boundaries of their own connection. During this time, Catherine reveals she is pregnant. This revelation adds a heavy layer of vulnerability to their fragile peace. Suddenly, their love isn't just about two people finding comfort in each other, it's about a future that feels incredibly precarious. As the Italian army begins a chaotic and disastrous retreat, the world outside their cocoon starts to break in. The retreat is a mess of panic and confusion. Frederic finds himself in a position where he has to desert the army to avoid being captured by his own side, as the military begins executing officers for perceived cowardice. He is no longer a soldier with a job, he is a man running for his life. He and Catherine flee towards Switzerland, a journey marked by extreme tension and the constant threat of discovery. They find themselves on a small boat, crossing Lake Maggiore in the middle of a storm. The water is dark and turbulent, a chaotic landscape that mirrors the instability of their lives. They eventually make it across the border into the neutrality of Switzerland. They settle into a secluded, idyllic life in a mountain chalet. For a while, it seems they've actually done it. They've escaped. They live a quiet, domestic life, almost entirely ignoring the news of the war. They have the peace they craved, but it's a peace that feels like it was stolen from a world that is still burning. But the peace is an illusion. The novel's ending is famously stark and devastating. Catherine goes into labor in a hospital in Lausanne, and despite Frederic's desperate, last-minute prayers to a god he had previously doubted, the outcome is tragic. Catherine dies from a sudden hemorrhage during childbirth. The sanctuary they built, the private world they tried to protect from the war, is shattered not by the war itself, but by the mechanical, unthinking cruelty of biology. The book ends with Frederic walking alone through the rain. He has lost everything, and the world remains as indifferent to his grief as it was to the soldiers dying in the trenches. When we look back at the structure of the story, it's clear that Hemingway is doing more than just telling a tragic love story. He's exploring the idea of escapism. Throughout the book, characters use alcohol, sex, and romance as psychological buffers. They are trying to numb the impact of a world that no longer makes sense. The romance between Frederic and Catherine is a profound attempt to find meaning through connection. But Hemingway suggests that even the most intense human connection is ultimately unable to shield us from the randomness of existence. There is a recurring motif in the book that ties all of this together: the rain. Rain is everywhere. It's in the mud of the trenches, it's in the storm on the lake, and it's falling at the very end when Frederic is alone. For Hemingway, rain represents the cold, indifferent, and drowning nature of life. It isn't a cleansing rain, it's a pervasive, damp force that symbolizes the inevitability of death. It's the atmosphere of a world that is constantly, quietly washing everything away. This ties into one of the most famous themes in the book, the contrast between the abstract and the concrete. The characters often talk about things like glory, honor, and sacredness, but Hemingway's prose focuses almost entirely on the tangible, messy realities. He writes about the taste of food, the sensation of mud, the specific pain of a wound, and the physical mechanics of death. By focusing on the concrete, he strips away the romanticized illusions of war. To Hemingway, the glory of battle is an abstraction that falls apart when you are actually standing in the mud, facing the reality of physical suffering. This leads us to the core philosophy of the novel, the idea of a broken world. There is a sense that the world is not a place of divine order or inherent meaning, but a place of chaos. One of the most striking metaphors in the book is the image of ants being boiled in a fire. It's a small, almost casual observation, but it illustrates a terrifying idea that death is a mechanical, unthinking process. The universe isn't actively trying to hurt us, it's just indifferent. The ants die, the soldiers die, and the lovers die, and the world keeps moving, unconcerned and unfeeling. The tragedy of the novel isn't just that Catherine dies, or that Frederic loses his sense of purpose. The tragedy is the realization that the sanctuary they tried to build, the private, romantic world, was always an illusion. They tried to create a space where the rules of the world didn't apply, but they were still subject to the same biological and physical realities as everyone else. The war was a macrocosm of chaos, and their personal tragedy was the microcosm. In the end, A Farewell to Arms is a study in the limits of human agency. We try to find meaning in our relationships, we try to find refuge in quiet places, and we try to find order in the midst of chaos. But Hemingway suggests that the world is ultimately much larger and much more indifferent than our individual lives. The arms in the title are a double entendre. They refer to the arms of the soldiers in the war, but also to the arms of the lovers. In the end, Frederic has to say farewell to both. He is left with nothing but the rain, a man standing alone in a world that has no obligation to care about his grief.